All right, it's lecture two for World War One. Today we're going to talk about America entering the war, kind of the things that pushed us towards war. We kind of look at the origination of our involvement is we're kind of, or we're very anti-war. We've been very isolationist in our history. George Washington warned us of entering foreign affairs, and that's kind of the role that most people in the United States wanted. We kind of looked at British propaganda, and they really made Germany out to be like the bully of Europe. We really shouldn't have had much of a say on one way or the other as far as who we wanted to support, but we had really strong ties with England, and we kind of believed in their propaganda. Uh, these strong ties were mostly due to economics, and the fact that we trade a lot with England. The good thing about the war and our role in the war at the beginning, because we don't enter the war till later, is the fact that it provides us great markets. So we transform our industries to wartime industries, and we don't have to fight. So we're making money off the war, but we're not losing lives. So it's really good for the United States. So the war begins to hit home. We start to mobilize, and the mobilization is like getting ready for war. So troops are being trained. Um, you know, war materials are being built, and we start to mobilize against the Central Powers. Okay, we wanted the Allies' repayment of debt. We wanted them to pay us back, and in order to do that, we had to support them, and we had to prevent the Germans from threatening our shipping. So if they sunk our ships, we're losing money. We don't like that. So we really need to have the Allies on our side, and in order to help get the money back, we need to help, like kind of when we need the war to be over so that the Allies can actually start to pay us back. So that's why we start to kind of feel like we need to be on the side of the Allies because we have more economic ties with them than any other country or than other sides. All right, so Britain blockades Germany. They have a really strong navy, so they blockade them. They want to cut off all supplies. And the Germans, in response, they start having unrestricted naval warfare. Unrestricted submarine warfare, sorry. And what they're doing is basically sinking any ships that they see, and they've basically decided that this is a way that they can try to get their supply ships through. There's an English boat. It's called the RMS Lusitania, and it's sunk by Germany, and they kill 128 American soldiers or American citizens that are on board. Um, Wilson's able to stay out of war, and he does that because of the election coming up. But this is really like kind of a spark towards war again. Another ship being sunk that's going to spark war, but it's really starting to get people to move more on the side of war. It's kind of ironic though. Germany had basically put out a telegram saying that if anyone was to, basically warning Americans to stay off any British ship because British ships were targets. So if people would have heeded the warning, the American citizens wouldn't have died. Okay, here's an image of the ship, and again, we talk about propaganda and yellow journalism. You see all these people out here, and it's kind of inciting anger for this event. All right, so the 1916 election, we have Wilson versus Charles Evan Hughes, and he runs on the platform. He kept us out of war, and he is going to win election on that. It's close, but he ends up winning re-election. So Wilson is going to be president until 1920. Okay, the final straw is the Zimmerman note. Okay, it's an intercepted telegram from Arthur Zimmerman to Mexico, and basically what Zimmerman, he's a foreign minister to Germany, and he's asking the Mexican government to step in and fight against the Americans and help to win the war. And basically what they're going to get back out of that, what the Mexicans will get out of that, is the territory that was lost during the Mexican-American War. And that's like Texas and California and Arizona, Nevada, Utah, a lot of territory that Mexico would have for their country. So it was kind of a really a big motive. And the fact that Mexico's not happy with what we're doing, practicing missionary diplomacy and the whole idea of Pancho Villa running back and forth, they're not happy. So it really we intercepted this telegram. We're like, oh no, Germany's like really trying to get involved, and so we had to kind of do something to combat that. Here's the telegram. Obviously, you can't read the code, but they could translate it out, and they figured out what was in it. All right, so April 2nd of 1917, Russia removes itself from the war, and Russia being communist, that was kind of an obstacle because they were on the side of the Allies. So if we entered the war on the Allied side, we would not be supporting an oppressive government, and so it makes it easier for Wilson to ask Congress to declare war on Germany, and they do. And instead of keeping us out of war, now Wilson's looking to try to keep a world safe for democracy is like his new slogan that he used to try to sell the war. So we begin to mobilize. We create the Selective Service Act in 1917. We have 24 million register and 3 million are called up. And the Selective Service Act is just a fancy term for the draft. So it's when normal citizens are going to be drafted into the military. So people that are not soldiers, not volunteers, it's completely random. So there's over 400,000 African Americans that are involved, but they serve in segregated units, and they're not allowed to be in the Navy and the Marines. So African Americans are still struggling to fight for equality and to fight to prove that they are as good as everyone else, and they want to be respected and be on the same lines as everyone. So there's an 8-month training period. They drill for 14 hours a day with fake weapons. Obviously, they can't use real weapons because all of the weapons that and the ammunition that was being created had to go to the war effort. Women got involved. They worked as nurses, secretaries, telephone operators, and as more and more men went to the military, factory jobs opened up as well, and they were forced to take on those jobs. So you can see the shipbuilding process is here. They made prefabricated ships, and so you can see these giant pieces of steel that would go together, and it would be like a giant jigsaw puzzle for them to put together, as opposed to like welding each piece on site. It made it a lot more efficient to build these ships. So we created, build a ton of ships really quickly. Here you can see women working in the field as well. And these are dry docks, so the ships are built in the dry dock, so it's easy to build them there. And then you can see the water's right here, and they just open it up, flood it up, and the ship floats, and they take it out. So pretty efficient use of manpower there, allowing them to create them really quickly. All right, so America turns the tide. So as we enter the war, most people in Europe are like kind of devastated. And you learned about that in world history and kind of what's going on in Europe. You bring in the American citizens or the American soldiers, and it's like fresh blood, fresh energy for the Allies, and it kind of like really pushes back on the Central Powers and the Axis, and it allows us to pretty much change the side of the war and end it pretty quickly. So we took over the Atlantic. We used the convoy system, and the convoy systems where you have all these ships floating together. So instead of one ship going across the ocean for the Germans to kind of pick off easily, you have hundreds of ships going together and they're being supported by military ships. So the supply ships are going to have an easier time because submarines are going to be more apprehensive about going in and taking out a bunch of ships as opposed to just one. All right, so the German U-boat warfare was diminished by early 1918 due to the convoy system and being able to take out these submarines. So fighting in Europe, we have our fighting force is called the American Expeditionary Force, the AEF, and it's just another term for the U.S. Army. IQ tests were created to test the mental ability of soldiers, and this was more of a test of education than intelligence, and it was basically used to get minorities into more dangerous positions. So if you weren't as smart, you'd be on the front lines, and if you were more intelligent, you'd have an easier job. Not that you were out of harm's way, but you wouldn't be right up there in the brunt of the fighting. General John J. Pershing and Blackjack Pershing, he's the general of the armies, and he's the man that led the AEF into battle. We have new weapons. You've seen all these before. Take some time to write them down. But I'm going to kind of go through and show you some pictures here. So if you need to pause here to write them down, go ahead and do that. So we're going to go through a machine gun. You can also see gas mask, not a weapon, but used as defense to prevent against some poison gas, which is a new weapon. Here's the new tanks. World War I, not that efficient, but kind of moving towards the idea of tanks during World War II, more of protection to break through barbed wire in the lines than as an offensive vehicle. Airplanes begin to surface. The beginning of the war, they used handguns and rocks and bricks to throw at people, but by the end of the war, they had created the interrupter, which allowed the machine guns to shoot through the propeller up front, and you start to see aerial combat. Artillery becomes pretty huge. Artillery would be placed in the back of trenches, and they would lob shells into no man's land, which is the territory between the trenches, and this would cause a lot of devastation because of all the explosions. Barbed wire was used to keep people out of trenches, but as tanks come, they were able to mow through that. Submarines, you can see here, Submarines would actually surface to sink ships, and then would allow time for people to get out of the ship. So it's kind of an interesting way of doing battle. But as the war went on, the submarines would be used in secret as opposed to actually surfacing and warning people that they're going to be sunk. Here's gas, poisonous gas being spread across the land. Okay, and then you start to see flamethrowers, which are obviously some of the most devastating weapons and crazy weapons as far as the mental aspect of it. It's a huge fear factor of having these flamethrowers. All right, and we're going to stop there. So thanks for listening.